They found his teeth before they found his name. Strewn across the cracked pavement behind the liquor store, still white against a pool of red, lit by flickering neon. The alley stank of piss, motor oil, and death. Tookie didn't scream when they jumped him. He didn't beg. But he bled, a slow, defiant ooze. His gold chain snapped before his spine did. 3 men. One betrayal. A hammer wrapped in black tape. The first blow didn't kill him, it baptized him. Before the blood dried, someone whispered, "Let this be the last king." But kings don't die easy. As his pulse faded, Tookie's eyes stayed open. Not rage. Not fear. Just memory, his mama's voice, his little brother's laugh, the way sunlight hit the steps outside Jordan Downs. He was gone in body. But something stayed behind. The alley would remember. The city would pay. And by morning, the war had already begun. Long before they called him Tookie, they called him Stanley. South Central didn't offer innocence, it offered tests. Stanley's came at 9, when his older cousin dragged him into a garage fight club. Concrete floors. Bare fists. No rules. He's soft. Someone laughed. Stanley didn't cry when the first punch cracked his lip. He didn't cry when his cousin walked away. He cried when he won because pain felt like proof. By 13 he learned the rules: don't blink, don't snitch, and never walk alone. The scar on his eyebrow stayed, a crooked reminder that in his world, love looked like violence and strength meant silence. Each bruise taught him something. Every cut shaped the boy into the king they'd later fear. But back then he was just another black kid with too many shadows and not enough doors. His fists got quicker. His eyes colder. His soul quieter. There was no ceremony, just sirens, screams, and sneakers slapping pavement. Stanley's first kill wasn't planned. A gun was shoved into his hand like a handshake. The boy across from him was just that, a boy. But the choice was made long before they stood in that alley. It was either pull or perish. Bang, daddy. The world didn't stop. It got quieter. Stanley didn't flinch. He felt the kickback, the heat, the smell of blood mixing with cordite. No tears. No thrill. Just silence. And that silence stayed with him. They called it courage. He called it survival. That night, the streets baptized him. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was becoming something else. Something dangerous. Something necessary. And deep inside, a piece of Stanley began to rot, making room for the man the world would soon call Tookie. Tookie learned fast. Trust no one. Friends became witnesses. Brothers became rivals. The one rule: stay feared. He built his reputation with knuckles and ice. No one asked him why. They already knew. Respect was the only currency the streets accepted. He kept a blade under his tongue, and a plan in every punch. When a rival crew kidnapped his cousin and sent back a finger, Tookie didn't hesitate. He lit the night with vengeance, each gunshot a sermon, each body a signature. The cops knew his name before they saw his face. But he didn't flinch. He smiled. Not because he liked the pain, but because the world finally knew Tookie was not to be tested. Ever. By 21, Tookie wasn't just feared, he was obeyed. The Crips weren't a gang anymore. They were an empire. Meetings replaced drive-bys. Cash replaced corners. Tookie wore suits now, beneath the armor, a strategist. He didn't yell. He didn't bark. He stared. And men moved. His word became law from Compton to Watts. The streets didn't sleep unless he said so. But behind the throne was a mirror. And sometimes he'd look at it too long. See the kid with busted lips. The boy who didn't flinch. The man who hadn't cried in years. Then he'd blink, and the king would return. Stay sharp, he muttered. Even lions get hunted. Power was his gospel. But even gods bleed. Tookie remembered her hands, rue from work, soft with him. His mother never cried, Not when the lights got cut, not when his father vanished. She just stared at the wall and smoked slow puffs like prayers. Silence was her answer to pain. When Tookie came home bloodied at 12, she didn't ask why. She wiped his lip, handed him aspirin, and turned back to the window. Her strength wasn't loud, it was cold steel. She loved him the only way she knew, by surviving. But even then, Tookie craved a different love. Something louder, warmer, something that didn't flinch at his bruises. That emptiness stuck. No matter how much blood he spilled, how many corners he claimed, he never filled that space. His mother taught him to endure, but not how to heal. And that silence, her silence, became his first language. The streets didn't hand out mercy. They handed out tools. Tookie's first weapon wasn't a gun. It was a brick. 14 years old, chased by 2 older boys over a stolen cassette player. He cornered himself in a dead-end lot, heart pounding like bass. He turned, lifted the brick, and waited. When they lunged, he swung. Blood, wood, bone, dawn, silence. They didn't chase him again. That moment shifted something. Not the violence, but the control. Tookie learned the power of fear. Not as a victim, but as a weapon. It was ugly. It was real. And it worked. And after that he didn't wait to get hit. He hit first. Hit harder. He stopped running. The brick never left his mind. Every move since, every plan, every hit was built on that same law. Control the fear, or be eaten by it. Tookie had a little brother once, Marcus. Always trailing behind with wide eyes and scraped knees. Marcus believed in heroes. Thought Tookie was one. But heroes don't carry knives. They don't come home at 3 a.m. with blood on their shirts. One night, Marcus asked, "You ever kill somebody?" Tookie didn't answer. He just stared at the TV, face lit in static. That silence hurt more than truth. Over time, Marcus stopped asking. Then, he stopped talking. By 16, he joined a rival crew, not out of hate but hunger. For something Tookie couldn't give. The streets didn't kill their bond. Silence did. Years later, when Tookie saw Marcus' face on a toe tag, he didn't cry. He just touched the scar on his eyebrow and said, "I taught him how to fight, not how to survive." Then he walked away. Because kings don't mourn. They endure. Before power, before blood, there was Jordan Downs. A concrete maze of dreams deferred. The playground was rusted. The walls wore bullet holes like birthmarks. But to Tookie, it was home. That's where he learned to throw hands. Where names became legends. Where every argument echoed off walls louder than sirens. You either got respected or got erased. He watched his first drive-by from the top floor stairwell, 10 years old, eating a cold slice of pizza, eyes wide. The man below didn't scream, just fell, like a marionette cut loose. Tookie didn't flinch, just kept chewing. That's the thing about Jordan Downs, it didn't raise children, it raised survivors. And from that roof, Tookie didn't just see his neighborhood. He saw his throne. At night, Tookie heard voices. Not ghosts, memories. The streets don't whisper. They scream. Tires screeching. Mothers wailing. Sirens growing closer, then fading. And in between his own thoughts, raw, cracked, endless. What if I said no? What if I ran? But the answers didn't matter. Choices weren't real in his world. Only reactions. Only instincts. In the quiet hours he sat on his roof, knees to chest, staring at stars drowned by city haze. That's where he dreamed, not of riches but escape. Of silence that didn't come with blood. Of his name, meaning something beyond headlines. Then sunrise would come, and with it, survival. He'd descend the stairs, mask up, and go make war. But for a few hours each night, The king returned to being a boy, alone with the voices in the dark. Tookie didn't build a gang. He built a system. Codes, crews, corners, every move mapped like war. He studied books stolen from libraries, Julius Caesar, Sun Tzu, Malcolm X, not for peace, for power. He learned how empires fall, how betrayal begins. So, he built his like a fortress. Respect was mandated. Disloyalty meant burial. The Crips stopped being a clique. They became currency. Boys who couldn't read carried his name on their knuckles. Territories were branded. Turf became profit. But with empire came envy. Men he fed now watched with clenched jaws. And deep down Tookie knew, nothing grows forever in the shadows. You rule long enough, and eventually, someone sharpens a blade behind your back. Every corner had eyes. Kids with BB guns turned scouts. Grandmothers peeked through curtains with loaded silence. The streets watched Tookie like a god. Or a ghost. He walked through South Central untouched, but not unmarked. Whispers followed. He took out Spider with one shot. He owns the cops on 108th. He don't sleep. Every story added weight. Myth became shield. But myths don't bleed. Men do. And Tookie was still flesh beneath the crown. One day, he passed a mural of Marcus, his brother. Spray-painted halo. Blood-red tears. Someone had crossed it out. Tookie stopped. Just stared. The respect he bled for was cracking. And in that moment he understood, fear kept them in line. But love? Love was gone. The cops didn't want to stop the war. They wanted to control it. One night, Tookie's safe house got hit. No sirens, no warnings. Just boots, batons, and cold steel. They didn't ask questions. They didn't wear names. One officer whispered, "We need you to keep the chaos contained." The message was clear. Be their monster, or be their target. Tookie didn't flinch. He stared the man down, blood trickling from his lip. "I don't answer to blue," he said. But he did. We all do, eventually. That night, Tookie knew the rules had changed. He wasn't just fighting gangs anymore. He was fighting the system that let him grow. Then came the threats. The fake raids. The silence on the news. They weren't trying to stop him. They were trying to own him. Power doesn't fade. It fractures. Inside the Crips, fractures spread fast. Leaders got greedy. Soldiers got loud. One lieutenant questioned Tookie in front of the crew. Big mistake. Tookie didn't yell. He nodded. That night, the man disappeared. No blood. No witnesses. Just silence. But fear doesn't buy loyalty forever. Soon, the streets buzz with doubt. He ain't the same. He went corporate. He forgot who made him. Tookie watched his kingdom rot from within, bit by bit. The war outside was nothing compared to the war brewing inside. He stopped attending meetings. Trusted fewer men. Slept beside steel. In the mirror he didn't see a king. He saw a survivor, just like the boys he once led. No more gods. Just men. And men fall. There was one night, just one, when the world paused. Tookie sat on the hood of a Chevy, smoking a black and mild, watching Compton sleep. No gunfire. No sirens. Just stillness. A woman walked by with a baby on her hip. She didn't flinch. She nodded. He nodded back. That moment meant more than money. More than blood. It felt like a version of life he'd never touched. Like a page from someone else's story. Then his phone buzzed. Another hit. Another retaliation. Peace lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes of silence in a decade of noise. He crushed the cigar, stood up, and walked away. Because men like him didn't get peace. Only pauses. Only brief, stolen mercy before the storm hit harder. It started with a whisper. Static in a burner phone. A deal went wrong. Cops showed up too fast, too precise. At first, Tookie thought it was luck. But then it happened again. And again. 3 safe houses compromised. A money drop burned. His crew scattered like rats under floodlight. Tookie knew the streets. Knew patterns. And this wasn't chance. This was precision. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands, eyes locked on a wall of coded names. One of them was a ghost. A leak. A Judas. The hardest part wasn't that someone was snitching, it was that it had to be someone close. Someone who once bled beside him. The wire wasn't just in the phone. It was in his heart. And the betrayal was already humming through the veins of his kingdom. It was Rico. Smiling Rico. The same one who pulled Tookie out of a burning car. The one who watched Marcus die without blinking. Rico wore loyalty like armor, but underneath he was leaking secrets. Tookie followed him one night. Quiet steps. Eyes like knives. Watched him slide into an unmarked sedan, handshake too familiar with a badge. Tookie didn't confront him. He watched. Let it burn into his soul. That betrayal didn't scream. It whispered. Rico didn't flip for money. He flipped for safety. For family. For something Tookie couldn't offer anymore. When Rico returned to the trap house that night, he found it empty. Just a cassette tape playing static, and a single bullet on the table. Message, receive. The clock had started ticking. And now, it was war. Tookie's empire cracked overnight. Drug lines vanished. Weapons caches raided. His lieutenants questioned him in whispers. Fear spread like smoke. Someone torched a stash house, 500,000 gone in flame. No witnesses. Just ash and silence. The streets no longer feared him. They doubted him. And doubt was lethal. He tried to rally the crew, but their eyes had changed. No loyalty. Just survival. He stood before them, silent, smoke curling from his cigar. We built this, he said. We bleed for this. But the silence that answered him was colder than betrayal. It was the sound of a crown falling off a head no one feared anymore. His power wasn't stolen. It was evaporating, slow, invisible, final. The cops moved in like wolves. A tip led them to a supposed arms deal, Tookie's name printed on the warrant. But he wasn't there. He was watching. Across the street, inside a parked van, eyes cold as steel. It was a trap. Rico's final gift. The bust was clean. Photographers, feds, press, all prepped to take down a myth. Tookie watched as his decoys got cuffed, humiliated. And for once, he smiled. Not because he won, but because he learned. He saw the play. And now he knew the field. The rules were no longer street rules. This was chess. And he was done playing the pawn. The system wanted him to fall loud. He'd vanish quiet. And return louder than ever. Rico didn't see it coming. He thought the silence meant forgiveness. He thought distance meant mercy. One morning, he opened his apartment door, and there it was. A box. Inside, a Crip blue bandana, soaked in blood. Beneath it, a photo of Marcus. On the back, you forgot whose brother he was. No gunshots. No firebombs. Just a message. 3 days later, they found Rico in a motel bathtub. No signs of forced entry. Just one thing carved into his chest: loyalty. Tookie never spoke of it. Never claimed it. But the streets knew. The Judas had been buried. And the king? The king had learned to kill without lifting a finger. Betrayal didn't break him. It sharpened him. Tookie returned to his original stronghold, an old boxing gym turned war council. But it wasn't the same. Half the faces were gone. The rest? Uncertain. A cloud hung over the room. Not smoke from cigars, but from fear. Tookie paced in silence, then stopped. We don't run, he said. We don't beg, we strike. But his voice didn't echo like before. One soldier shifted, avoiding his eyes. Another checked his phone too often. Loyalty had grown thin. That night, a Molotov crashed through the window. Flames clawed up the wall. It wasn't a random hit. It was a message from within. The throne was on fire, and the king was burning with it. As smoke filled the rafters, Tookie stood still, staring into the flames, face unreadable. The war wasn't coming. It was here. Tookie vanished. No phones. No meetings. No bodies. Just silence. The city whispered his name like a curse. Some said he fled. Others said he was dead. But he was working. Quiet. Strategic. He called it Ghost Protocol. 10 small fires instead of one big blaze. He hit enemies at home, in cars, in clubs, never the same way twice. They never saw him. Only the aftermath. A burning car here. A missing cousin there. Tookie learned that terror didn't need volume, it needed precision. He wasn't just reclaiming the streets. He was erasing the memory of weakness. His name returned to lips. Not as rumor, but as warning. You don't hunt Tookie. He hunts you. And when the smoke cleared, no one could deny it, he was back. Tookie kept a notebook. No names, just initials. A blood ledger. Every man who betrayed. Every life taken. Every street lost. Each page marked in red ink. It wasn't revenge. It was accounting. One by one, he settled debts. The Crips that flipped. The dealers that defected. The cops who whispered. His war wasn't loud anymore. It was surgical. A chessboard soaked in gasoline. And he was the only one holding a match. But, even as he crossed off initials, he felt emptier. Not satisfied. Just clean. Like wiping dirt off a grave. This wasn't about ruling anymore. It was about remembering who he was. Not Tookie the myth. But Stanley, the boy they tried to bury. And he was making sure the city never forgot him again. Tookie walked into his cousin's funeral wearing the same suit he killed his first rival in. Navy blue, blood memory still stitched in the seams. The church fell silent. Heads turned. Mothers clutched sons. He didn't cry. Didn't kneel. Just stood by the casket, staring down at the boy who once called him Big Bro. That boy got caught in a crossfire, meant for someone else. A ghost debt. Tookie clenched his jaw, but his eyes were empty. This war wasn't clean. It bled sideways. It stained people who never chose it. And still, he didn't stop. Couldn't. As the pastor prayed, Tookie whispered to the body, "I'll end it soon, one way or another." But even he didn't know what that meant anymore. Tookie stood at the edge of the warehouse rooftop, looking down at the city. It didn't look conquered. It looked tired. Like him. He thought of everything he built. Then, everything he lost. The throne had no cushion. Just nails. He reached into his coat and pulled out a lighter. Flicked it once. Twice. Then dropped it onto the crates of cash below. Flames leapt fast. Money curled into black petals. Men below screamed, tried to save what they could. But Tookie didn't move. He lit a cigar, inhaled and muttered, "No king without fire." He wasn't walking away. He was burning the crown. And as the sirens neared, he smiled, not because it was over, but because he'd finally chosen the ending. Prison didn't break Tookie. It muted him. Pending wall. 4 walls, 1 window, and the endless tick of nothing. No crew. No calls. Just echoes. He sat on a steel bunk, staring at concrete like it held answers. They put him in solitary, said he was too dangerous to mix. But Tookie didn't fight it. He welcomed the silence. For the first time in years, he didn't have to perform. Didn't have to lead. Just breathe. The days bled together. He marked time in shadows. read books, wrote letters, thought about Marcus, thought about Mama. He even thought about God, but not in prayer. More like a negotiation. You take my name, he whispered. I'll leave the streets behind. But the streets never left him. Even in silence, he could still hear gunshots. Tookie wrote every day. Not rants, not confessions. Blue-inked truth. Letters to kids he never met. You don't want my throne, he wrote. You want your own name. Some got published. Most didn't. He didn't care. It wasn't about redemption, it was about residue. If one boy paused before pulling the trigger, it mattered. If one girl turned away from the set, it mattered. But part of him knew. They'd still bleed. Still bury brothers. The cycle wasn't broken, just stalled. He pressed pen to paper harder. Wrote like it was the only way to scream. Don't let my story be yours. But the silence around him stayed. No visits. No forgiveness. Just ink on pages, folded into time. They stopped saying Tookie on the streets. Just him, or the ghost. His legend faded, not with bullets, but with time. New kings rose. Flashier. Louder. Hungrier. But none as precise. None as cold. Tookie's face disappeared from murals. His name from whispered warnings. It was like he never ruled. But in one corner of South Central, a boy spray-painted "TOT-W" in blue Joe. Not for power. For memory. A crown-shaped dot over the W. Tookie's name still moved in the wind, even if no one said it. He became something else. Not a man. Not a myth. Just a consequence. The silence he chose had erased him. But somewhere deep in the city, the echoes still knew who he was. And what he cost. Mama died while he was locked up. No ceremony. No ceremony. No letter. Just a EO sliding a folded note under his door. Tookie read it twice. Then folded it again and placed it under his pillow. He didn't cry. Couldn't. That part of him was gone. But later that night, he whispered into the dark, I'm sorry. Not for the violence. But for not being her son anymore. There were others who remembered. Old soldiers, scattered across halfway houses and shelters. They spoke his name with respect. Not for the fear. But for what he once stood for. Brotherhood. Godite. Purpose. They lit candles. Poured drinks. Toasted the past. But the city moved on. And Tookie. He remained behind, alone with ghosts. They never gave him a send-off. No fanfare. No final riot. Tookie's end came like his silence, unannounced. Some say he died in his cell. Others claim he was moved, hidden, protected. The truth? Buried. Daddy Bowl. But silence doesn't need a grave. It lingers. It haunts. Somewhere in the wind, a boy still reads his letters. A mother still curses his name. A rival still flinches at shadows. And in a city that forgets fast, the quiet ones echo longest. Tookie didn't get peace. He bought pause. But he left behind more than bodies. He left a mirror, dirty, cracked, unflinching. Look in it, and you don't just see him. You see the world that made him. And the silence that swallowed him whole. Years later, they made a documentary. They called it Crip King, The Rise and Ruin of Tookie Williams. Slick graphics. Moody voiceovers. Experts who never met him. They sold his story like a mixtape, cut, looped, dramatized. Kids watched it and nodded. He was a beast. He was a genius. Nobody asked what it cost. Tookie became a brand. A warning. A debate topic in classrooms full of kids who never saw a body drop. And just like that, his life, his pain, was repackaged. Sanitized for streaming. The streets didn't speak. They just watched. Because they knew the truth didn't make it to the credits. Tookie wasn't a hero. Wasn't a villain. He was a man made by silence, broken by loyalty, and buried by both. New sets rise. New kings wear blue. But they don't speak his name. Not out of disrespect, but fear. Tookie's shadow still lives on the block. In every corner claimed. In every stare that lingers too long. He's not a role model. He's a ghost rule. Do not betray, do not flinch, and never forget who paid the price first. Young Crips wear bandanas like armor, not understanding where it came from. But when they hear a story whispered in barbershops or alley dice games, and it ends with, "That was Tookie's move," they nod in silence. Not reverence. Just recognition. The streets don't forget. They just evolve. And Tookie? He still walks with them. Invisible. Unforgettable. One boy read Tookie's prison letters in the school library. Sat there for hours. Quiet. Focused. He didn't laugh. Didn't flip ahead. Just read every word. Something changed. He walked different. Spoke less. Fought less. A counselor asked why. He said, "Because I don't need to be a king to survive." No cameras caught that moment. No headlines printed it. But that's how legacies survive, not in riots, but in rewrites. One choice at a time. Tookie never met that boy. But in some way, that was the revenge. Not violence. Not fire. But change. Quiet, relentless, invisible. Just like the man who started it. The child walked away that day with nothing in his hands but everything in his mind. They talked once about naming a center after him, a youth home, maybe a writing program. But the idea died in committee. Too risky. Too raw. Some said he didn't deserve it. Others said he deserved more. Meanwhile, the city built new condos where Jordan Downs used to stand. Concrete ghosts under polished steel. Tookie's past paved over. But one night, someone lit a candle on the sidewalk. Just one. Next to it, a photo of Tookie, not the mugshot. The smile. The boy. No flowers. No message. Just fire and memory. The wax melted. The wind blew. But the flame stayed. Because legends don't need statues. They need stories. And smoke always finds its way back to the sky. They asked an old Crip once what happened to Tookie. He lit a cigarette, stared off, and said, "There's no retirement plan for ghosts." Then he smiled. But it wasn't joy. It was memory. And pain. And pride. Tookie was gone. But he was everywhere. In every silence after a shot. In every pause before revenge. In the way fear walked beside respect. He wasn't trying to be immortal. Just understood. But the streets don't deal in understanding. Only consequence. And so, he became one. Not a king. Not a killer. But the pause before both. A man who made millions in silence, and paid for it in full. The smoke is gone. The fire is out. But the story. It still breathes. Whispered on rooftops. Echoed in alleys. Final line, you never kill a ghost. You just become one.